You've no doubt probably heard of the Jesuits, the Jesuit movement or Jesuit Order, along with many stories, theories, conspiracy theories that they're a bunch of evil, unrighteous, wicked priests, etc., etc. So let's look at the real history of the Jesuits from a former Jesuit who spent 14 years as a Jesuit in the early or late 1800s. This book is called 14 Years a Jesuit. A record of personal experience and a criticism. Huizenbroek, Paul Graf von Huizenbroek, 1852 to 1923. 14 Years a Jesuit, Chapter 15. A criticism of the inner constitution of the order. Some general characteristics. By the inner constitution of the order, the author meant the spirit of the order. Theoretically, it is manifested in the constitutions of the order, and practically in its activity. Thus, the inner and outer are combined, the organism of the order with its actual and its historical life being performed by both. Criticism will therefore extend to the whole of this domain. But first, some preliminary questions must be answered. 1. Have we the real, and above all, the complete constitutions of the Jesuit Order? In the extant editions of the Institute of the Society of Jesus, and his footnote indicator there, and it reads Prague 1737, Rome 1870, etc. The latest edition of the Institute, published in Florence in 1803, cannot be obtained at ordinary booksellers. When this author sought to procure a copy from the order through the Berlin branch of the Herder firm of publishers at Freiburg, which is closely connected with the order, his request was refused. They would not supply him with the latest edition even for payment. A positive answer cannot be given. We can only take what is offered as the complete constitutions in good faith, trusting in the honour of those who issue them, namely the Jesuit Order itself. Nor is corroboration by another authority of the completeness of the constitutions to be found anywhere. Of course, the author was only thinking of an ecclesiastical authority which has had an insight into the original documents, the first drafts and editions of the constitutions. The order alone tells us these are my constitutions and rules, but not even the order itself has ever stated officially and solemnly, these are my complete constitutions, my complete rules, there are no others. Serious doubts arise as to the completeness when we peruse the Summarium Constitutionum and the Reguli Communes, footnote indication, Inst. SJ 2, 70 to 78, pages, I guess, 70 to 78. For example, those portions of the constitutions which are supposed to contain a summary, the quintessences of the principles and rules, a summary, summarium, of those statutes which relate to the spiritual direction of our members and which are to be observed by all. An incoherent mass of matter is to be found here, consisting of 52 points and 49 rules. Regulations dealing with mere externals stand side by side with others concerned with ascetic discipline. Fundamental rules for the structure and direction of the society alternate with what is obviously unimportant and transitory. What astonishes us, or astonishes the author, is not so much the lack of arrangement as the lack of coherence. They were sensible of gaps, or the author was sensible of gaps, and involuntarily the thought arises. Has not something been omitted or left out here, and here, and here? The Summarium and the Reguli Communes were read once every month during meals from the pulpit of the refectory. That's where they all hung out, right, had dinner. A bit like the Harry Potter scenes, right? The more often the author heard them, the more strongly he doubted. Am I hearing something complete or something consciously and intentionally curtailed? He pondered. In important and decisive conversations to be mentioned later, he expressed his doubts to the provincial of the German province, Father Jacob Ratgeb. He received the evasive reply, leave alone such quibbling, take things as they come, what lies in the future does not concern today. The transactions of the Fifth General Congregation, 1593 to 1594, afford abundant food for doubt and consideration from this point of view. The author, etc., started to know them only from the decrees published by the order itself. Incidentally, why has the order never yet published the complete minutes of even a single general congregation? And there have been 25 of these up to the present time, his time, the 1800s. Space surely has not been lacking in its numerous and voluminous works on the inner and outer history of the order. But even from these decrees it can clearly be seen that there is intentional obscurity with regard to the constitutions, so that we have a full right to doubt their completeness when printed and published by the order. And he found, in the first place, everything in the formula Instituti, which was laid before Pope Julius III and sanctioned by him and his successors, and everything in it referring by way of explanation to our constitutions, or to their constitutions, is and must be looked upon as the substance of their institute. And although there is other matter belonging to the substance of their institute, the congregation has decided that it need not be discussed at the present time. And that, according to this footnote indication down the bottom, the footnote down the bottom is Decree 44. Directly after this, it's read that a request was made to explain more clearly what are the substantials of the institute, and a question was raised as to whether it would not be advantageous to add some examples of substantials, which seemed opportune, to the sentence, "There is no other matter belonging to the substance of the institute." The congregation consequently determined to amend the decree, and that was Decree 45. The 58th decree is the result of the amendment. The substance of the institute is, in the first place, that contained in the formula or regula of the society, which was submitted to Pope Julius III and was confirmed by him and some of his successors. In the second place, that without which the contents of the formula could not hold good at all, or only with difficulty, namely 1. There are some essential impediments to admission. 2. A judicial form needs not be observed on dismissal. 3. A statement of conscience must be made to the superior. 4. Everyone must be content that anything about him which has been learned outside confession shall be notified to the superior. 5. All must be prepared to show suitable love and charity to one another within their brotherhood, right, that order. And other similar points, the confirmation of which the congregation has no time to consider at present, especially as the generals can confirm them when necessary, if they are not confirmed in other general congregations. But the 7th General Congregation of 1616 decrees almost in contradiction to the 5th. The congregation decided that it would be more advisable to abstain from the confirmation of other things pertaining to the substance of the institute besides these expressed in the formula, because it is not possible to express everything in summary. If anybody should feel any doubt, he can apply to the worthy father, the general of the order, and learn from him what he ought to think in this respect, and he could possibly leave things out, beat around the bush and give you the wrong information understanding. And that's Decree 40, and it goes on like this for quite a while. All these supposed constitutional rules or orders. Secret statutes must also be inferred from an utterance of the Spanish Jesuit Miranda, appointed as assistant to the general, which is contained in a letter written to a friend in 1736 and communicated by the Jesuit Ibanez in his reports on the Jesuit state of Paraguay, South America. Until he came to Rome, where he first obtained accurate information about everything, he did not comprehend or understand what the society was. Its government is a special study which even the provincials understand. Only one who fills the office which this particular person occupied could ever begin to understand it. Since Miranda was a provincial before he was nominated assistant, he must have understood what he was writing about. Ibanez also mentions unprinted ordinances, regulations and letters of the general and provincials which doubtless were to be kept secret. And footnote below is Ibid 2:373. The words of Don Juan de Palafox, Bishop of Los Angeles, whom the Jesuits hated with a deadly hatred and persecuted even in the grave, are significant in this connection. He says in his famous letter of January 8th, 1649 to Innocent X, it's Pope Innocent X, to which he must refer again later. What other order has constitutions which are not allowed to be seen, privileges which it conceals, and secret rules and everything relating to the arrangement of the order hidden behind a curtain? The rules of every other order may be seen by all the world, but among the Jesuits there are even some of the professed who do not know the statutes, privileges, and even the rules of the society, although they are pledged to observe them. Well, that's kind of weird. Therefore they are not governed by their superiors according to the rules of the church, but according to certain concealed statutes known by the superiors alone. So they have no clue, but they're following it, as he previously stated, and according to certain secret and pernicious denunciations, which leads to a large number being driven from the midst of the society, or the bosom of the society. And footnote indicated below states Don Juan de Palafox, letters to Innocent X, Frankfurt and Leipzig, 1773, page 116, etc. 2. Has the Jesuit Order secret instructions, and are the often quoted monita privata authentic? From what has been and must still be said, the author had not the least doubt that the order has secret statutes which it guards carefully. The Jesuit Order merits the designation secret society more than any other association. The question as to the authenticity or spuriousness of the monita cannot be answered so easily and simply. The monita privata societatis Jesu, or Jesu, secret instructions of the Society of Jesus, first appeared in print at Krakow in 1612, after they had already been circulated in manuscript form. The editor seems to have been the ex-Jesuit Zahorowski. Almost innumerable editions and reprints in all civilized tongues followed one another. The latest edition was published at Bamberg in 1904. That's in his era, right? The writer's era. And so forth. The German Jesuit Gretzer, a prominent theologian of the order, to refute it, up to most recent times, in his era obviously, Jesuit after Jesuit has come forward to repudiate it. In other words, say no. A few years ago, in his time, Adolf Harnack asked his opinion as to whether the monita were genuine or not. The author replied that they had to distinguish between the genuineness and the form and of the matter, and he still holds to that distinction to the end of his days probably. The genuineness of the form, for example, that the monita was drawn up by the order itself in the published text as a secret supplement to the official constitution of the order, is hard to prove. Of the genuineness of the content, for example, that the monita contains regulations in harmony with the spirit of the order, whether its author were a Jesuit or an enemy of the Jesuits, whether he wished to write a serious or a satirical work, the author was as positive as of the existence of secret instructions of the order. But even the genuineness of the form cannot be easily disposed of, and has been done by the Jesuits, and recently in his era, in an especially superficial manner by the Jesuit Order. As a footnote indication, Jesuiten Fabelin, page 91, etc. So it's probably German there or something. And it's got all this other information on it. We're going to skip a lot of that for the sake of content, because we do remember reading a French version of the order translated into English, and they were basically saying, you come into the brotherhood, you learn all our stuff, you go into the churches all over the country, all over the world, and you start rifts, division between them, right? Someone will say something and you suggest something and try to convince them that this is right, and it causes problems, separation, divisions, etc. You'd probably have two of them in there, one playing good cop, bad cop. One would be for that church but secretly against it. The other one would be against it but was secretly for it, for the Jesuit Order. They're working together, right? I hope it didn't confuse anybody. Yeah, they're a good cop, bad cop. See, they need to do that, right? The Constitutions openly mentioned in Part 10 a class of members who might properly be styled affiliates, namely all those Jesuits who have become bishops or cardinals. He must also vow to God that if ever he is compelled to accept any preferment outside the society, he will at all times listen to the advice of the general for the time being, or of any person appointed by him to take his place. And if he thinks what is so recommended to be desirable, will perform it, and not that he who is preferred holds any member of the society in the place of the superior, but that he desires of his own free will to be bound in the sight of God to do that which he shall perceive to be best for God's service, or probably order service, and is content, and there should be one to set it before him in charity and Christian liberty to the glory of God and our Lord. Footnote indication down the bottom there, Constitution 10, 1 and 6. And then further on, see chapter 14 for the vow of the professed Jesuits. So that's what we'd like to have a look at to clear it up, right, from what we've heard, what we've read from the French translation. There's a chapter here. What chapter is this? I'm going to try and find that. See if we can find it. Quick look through here. We've probably got a bit too far. Actually, what we might do is go to the beginning of the book. 14 Years of Jesuit, Count von Hohenspruch, translated by Alice Simon. I'm going to go look at the contents page and see if we can actually find that chapter and see what they're really all about. Should have a contents page here somewhere. General verdict of the Jesuit Order. Maybe that's what it was. Just click the next page, see if there's any more. Okay, what would that be? 423, 270. See if we can go to 270. Okay, go back a bit. See what they were really all about. Okay, chapter 23, the attitude of the order to learning. This attitude has really been sufficiently characterized in the previous section, but as the Jesuit order makes special claims to learning, and even in the non-ultramontane world, this view is widely spread. A further consideration of the subject from other more general points of view seems justifiable, because apparently, we came across this information from the French version translated in English, that they realise that children are gullible from, say, the age of 1 or 0 to 7, so they can teach them all this stuff at a young age, knowing they're gullible, and then when they get to adulthood, if they're part of the order, they'll repeat everything that they've been taught. They'll go out there and they'll repeat it, they'll parrot it, pass it on, right? Because it's embedded in their subconscious, right? They'll do whatever they tell them to do. The attitude has really been sufficiently characterized in the previous section, but as the Jesuit order makes special claims to learning, and as even in the non-ultramontane world this view is widely spread, a further consideration of the subject from other more general points of view seems justified. Of course, the principles which the Roman Church sets up in regard to its conception of knowledge and freedom of research are also the principles of the Jesuit order. So they're possibly behind the Roman Catholic Church. Like, you might have the latest Pope, Pope Francis. He might be Polish or whatever, but he's really a Jesuit. So they say, so we've read. Of course, the principles which the Roman Church sets up in regard to its conception of the knowledge and freedom of research are also the principles of the Jesuit Order. These principles are expressed in innumerable official papal utterances, of which the author could only quote a few of the more modern ones in his day. 1. Provincial Council of Cologne, Title 1. We believe that's, we're not too sure what that is. It might be Latin or something. 1C6, especially confirmed by the Pope. 2. A letter of Pius IX to the Archbishop of Munich of December 21st, 1863. Syllabus of Pius IX of December 8th, 1864. Vatican Council of the year 1870. Constitution of Leo XIII, and so forth and so forth. All these manifestos are included, so far as their content are concerned, in the infallible pronouncement of the Vatican Council. And there's a footnote indication after 1907. For the wording, see his book, Die Katholische Theologischen Fakultäten. I'm not too sure what that is. It's probably German or something, maybe even Latin. Organism, etc., etc., etc. Paragraph 2238. If anyone asserts that human knowledge should develop so freely that its assertions, even when they are opposed to revealed doctrine, are to be regarded as true and cannot be condemned by the Church, he shall be excommunicated. In other words, cut off, kicked out from the Church, Roman Catholic Church, because you're basically speaking against them. These Roman principles as to learning find their practical application in the Index, the rules of which were remodelled in 1900 by Leo XIII, so he possibly revised them, had them rewritten, and suspended as a Damocles sword over the whole output of Catholic learning. To this must be added Rome's final right of decision to so-called dogmatic facts, Facta Dogmatica, and dogmatic texts, Textus Dogmatici, by which vast domains of historical knowledge are withdrawn from free research. So it sounds like they've hidden it. You can't access it. You can't get hold of it. You're not allowed to see it. But even the silent recognition of the bondage of all knowledge assumed by the authoritative Roman doctrine did not suffice for the Jesuit Order. It therefore declared in the 12th decree of the 23rd General Congregation of 1883, since in such a mass of errors which still and everywhere and in our own day have frequently been condemned by the Roman See, or the Holy See, it is to be feared that some of our own members of the Jesuit Order too may be attacked by this plague. The General Congregation declares that our society is to abide by the doctrine contained in the encyclical Quanta Cura of December 8, 1864 of Pius IX, Pope Pius IX, and reject, as it always has rejected, all errors rejected by the syllabus of this same Pope. But since some provinces of the Order, Jesuit Order, have demanded the particular condemnation of so-called liberal Catholicism, the General Congregation gladly accedes to this request and earnestly entreats the Venerable Father General to have a care that this plague is by all means averted from their society, the Jesuit Order. Right? Thus the Order solemnly gave its consent to the destruction initiated by Rome of teaching and learning. Thus from its very inception, modernism, under the name of liberal Catholicism, was outlawed. And how this sentence of outlawry was carried out has been seen in our own day, his day, by the tragic fate of the Jesuits Tyrrell and Bartoli. The attitude of the Order to learning furnishes the contents of a book published at Innsbruck with the imprimatur of the Order and the ecclesiastical authorities by the Jesuit Dr. Joseph Donat, Royal and Imperial Professor, etc., etc. Those who acknowledge the Christian, for example Catholic, or universal, worldly, global, conception of the world cannot accept this freedom of thought and knowledge just characterized as freedom from the syllabus and index. Here, in opposition to the Church, is the true reason why thousands, in whom Kant, he's a very famous writer, Kant's philosophy, etc., autonomy in thought has become the veritable sinew of their intellectual life, will not hear any guidance by revelation and the Church. They can no longer enjoy the idea of letting their reason unhesitatingly unhesitatingly accept the truth from an external authority, i.e. the papacy. It is not knowledge within which the church attacks, but error, not truth, but the emancipation or the liberation or freedom of the human intellect from submission to the authority of God, which comes forward under the disguise of scientific truth. So they were opposed to people free thinking, having their ideas, their thoughts, etc. in regards to all, especially when it came to learning. If it is an infallible dogma which is opposed to a scientific result, the believer soon finds the conflict springing from his investigation at an end, for he knows then the value of his hypothesis, that it is no true progress but error. Thus the philosophical errors of the present day are almost invariably opposed to infallible dogmas, for the most part fundamental doctrines of the Christian religion. These are the title deeds, on the strength of which revelation in the church impress on the investigator the duty not to set his own opinions in opposition to religious doctrines or their dogmas, right? Whatever they say, don't have your own opinions. You're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to make these statements, etc., etc., because no opposition can continue between faith and reason. If the Catholic investigator finds a scientific opinion in opposition to a not infallible declaration, for example, the decision of a Roman cardinal's congregation, as in the case of Galileo, Galileo the one saying that the world was round and all this sort of stuff, and the Roman Catholic Church says, hey, cut it out, all this sort of stuff, and they excommunicated him, threatened him, all that sort of stuff. So he buckled and went with them, right? Whatever they said, he renounced what he believed and adopted theirs. Apparently that's just what we read. We're not too sure now, and have to do some more research on them. You could probably do that yourself. So Galileo, he will maintain an impartial attitude and once more test his views on the side of God. If he is compelled to admit calmly to himself that his views are not so convincing as to hold their own in face of or so high an authority directed by the Holy Spirit, he will humbly renounce the natural satisfaction at being allowed to retain his opinion, remembering that true wisdom is convinced of the fallibility of human reason and is ready and willing to accept instruction from a God-directed authority, i.e. the papacy, or basically the papacy. Everything that is good and profitable in modern knowledge remains untouched by the syllabus. It only attacks what is anti-Christian in our time, in his time, and their leading ideas. It is not the freedom of knowledge which is condemned, but that liberal freedom which shakes off the yoke of belief. So what he's basically saying is, you can have your own opinions, your own ideas, about if it opposes the church, well, that's it. You're not allowed to have those, right? All that sort of stuff. Yeah, they don't mind you seeking knowledge and having wisdom, all that sort of stuff, but if it goes against the church, drop it immediately, pal. Basically. Okay, and it's got down here, those who are convinced that even in our generation, his generation, the Christian faith is the noblest inheritance handed down from the past, and no one which it is essential to maintain, will raise no objection if the church does not withdraw even before men like Kant, Spinoza, Schopenhauer, Strauss, in the application of the power of the index. Ranke's history of the popes has been placed on the index because it disparages the constitution and doctrines of the Catholic Church. What about the Jesuit Order? Not because it speaks the truth about the popes. Okay, there's a footnote down there below. And it actually says, in this last passage, then the church claims dominion even over history. They got authority over history. So they can rewrite it. They can say, no, you're not allowed to say that. No, we're changing it. And this is the history according to us. Okay, that's what it's saying right there. It's quite an interesting book. What was that on Goeth? What's that put on Goeth? This exposition is prefaced by the Jesuit author in unconscious irony and absolute failure to grasp its meaning, by Goeth saying, and after all, why should not Goeth be quoted on behalf of syllabus and index? He's another famous philosopher, writer, etc. And there it is in German, probably. mentions Jesuit writers, the Jesuit Vows, which fills several quarto volumes with their names and works. And no Jesuit has ever gone beyond scholasticism and Thomas Aquinas. The bulky works of a Suarez, Sanchez, Buchanan, Molina del Lugo, and to mention the most recent, a Tongiogi, Palmieri, Liberatore, Klugen, Pishfik, Lemon, are nothing but endless repetitions and variations on the philosophical ideas of the 12th and 13th centuries, which in their turn are the outcomes of Aristotelian thought. Whether the Jesuit work of philosophy has appeared at Rome or Madrid, Paris or Lisbon, in Germany, Belgium or England, whether it dates from the 16th, 19th or 20th century, the contents, in spite of all differences of form and language, are everywhere the same. This sterility, this complete lack of creative intellectual power, is enforced with iron necessity by the position which the order in its constitutions assigns to philosophy. As we have already seen, it is the handmaid, the servants of theology, and Jesuit ultramontane theology is essentially stationary and incapable of development. For how should or could the handmaid rise above the mistress? How could she go along a road of her own, where she is bound by blind obedience in innumerable directions to the girdle of her employer? The author repeats, for the learning of an organisation, its attitude to philosophy, if it is at all concerned with it, is the test, since it is the branch of knowledge which depends most on the original activity of the intellect. Tried by this test, Jesuit learning does not prove itself true metal, at any rate, not of its own prospecting. It is ancient wisdom, as the 23rd General Congregation expressed it, in the best case for in a new dress, usually without even this. For theology methods are even simpler. It goes along fixed high roads towards goals unchangeably set up at the beginning. So basically it's doctrines, dogmas that are fixed. You can't change them. You are based on the actual real definition of religion that's supposedly left out of all the dictionaries, so you won't realise that. The real definition of religion is you're bound to, you're bound by, you're chained by the holy texts, the church, their fixed doctrines, their dogmas. Okay, and if you argue with them and say, hey, you think for yourself and stuff, they're like, cut it out, where you'll be excommunicated, etc. Subtle threats like that are thrown your way. They're fixed and you cannot change them because they say so. And there's heaps more here. In a memorial of November 5th, 1757 to the Empress Maria Theresa van Swieten said, facts have shown that the studies at the University of Vienna were in an unsatisfactory condition since the Jesuit society, had been incorporated with it. It was consequently clear that it had not attained the goal which the two emperors, Ferdinand I and II, had set before them. On the contrary, all the universities which came under Jesuit rule had fallen away into decay. Graz or Mutz, Tarnow are striking instances. It would certainly have been better if the university had never been united with the Jesuit Order. Maria Theresa herself had no very high opinion of Jesuit learning. When the Court Commission of Studies in 1775 proposed to her that the foundations of an Academy of Science, suggesting that a beginning should be made with the three Jesuit teachers, Hell for astronomy, Scarfa for physics, Marco for mathematics, along with Professor Jacun, she said, I could not make up my mind to begin an academic des sciences with that with 3 ex-Jesuits and a professor of chemistry, however excellent. We should make ourselves ridiculous in the eyes of the world. And she did not consider the Abbe Hal strong enough, and it would repay neither the time nor the trouble to find something that even worse than the existing academies. And that's from the archives of the Royal Imperial Commission on Studies, quoted by Kink 1510. On September 7th, 1629, whether this was a probable deduction, he devotes... Who is this? The head of... Freiburg. Some guy from Freiburg. Maybe Schreiber. And this writer quotes his rant. There is one peculiarity of Jesuit learning as to which the author desired to say a few words. Knowledge without objective truth, if indeed there be such a thing, and without subjective truthfulness, is impossible. The investigator must reproduce as he finds them the results of his investigations, which he recognises as true, whether they prove agreeable to him or the opposite. If he alters or adapts them to fit in with definite aims or his own religious or political attitude, his motives, agenda, etc., he is guilty of falsification. So, could that mean that the translations of the various Bibles throughout the centuries down to the Americanized English translations are such skillful falsifications? Because there are certain verses, when you compare them with the original ancient Tav Asher manuscripts, these are hand copied by scribes amongst 800 BCE in Asher, in Edessa, now modern Turkey, and the Galilean Aramaic manuscripts of the Apostolic Church of the East, hidden and preserved for over 2,000 years, translated as the nearest English equivalent. Mark 15:34, where Christ raises his head, cries out to his Father in heaven, and says, supposedly says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, etc. In the Galilean Aramaic, his language, and the language of his disciples, the Galilean fishermen, etc. They hang out with him 24/7, 365. They have translated into the English as, why have you forsaken me? When God doesn't forsake, and he wouldn't forsake his son, so it's an incorrect translation. According to the translator Victor N. Alexander, a native-born Aramaic-speaking translator, filmmaker from Mesopotamia, Syria, it is incorrect. Wherefore does not mean forsaken. It means, why is he left there, hanging up there? Is obviously there for his destination, right? His destiny to die on a cross, be scourged and all that sort of stuff for mankind, sinful mankind, as a way back to the Father, and so forth. It's their translation into the English of the original Galilean Aramaic is incorrect. It's a second or third generation Greek Arabic transliteration, apparently. Second or third generation. So it was like years and years and years, or centuries after the actual event. So it's quite an interesting book of what their Jesuit Order are up to. Okay, here's the note here. In dealing with the gunpowder plot of the Jesuits, right, but it's probably Guy Fawkes, etc., playing with the complicity of the Jesuits, Dürr does not even mention Jardin's standard work, a narrative of the gunpowder plot. Probably because, as shown in the previous chapter, Jardine quotes from the records much that is unfavourable to the Jesuit Garnet, provincial of the English province. And there's a footnote indication here. And we could find it. In the chapter, Ignatius of Loyola founded the Jesuit Order for the extirpation of Protestantism. Dürr adduces all manner of proofs to show that the Jesuit Order was not founded against Protestantism, because they were Protestants, right? And you had latter movement that became the Protestants. So they were protesting for reform of the Roman Catholic Church because they had things wrong. They were teaching the people wrong, okay, and so forth. But omits the very significant passage from the bull, or papal bull, of Pope Urban VIII, 1623, which decrees the canonization of Ignatius Loyola. Ignatius Loyola. They say that. Ignatius Loyola. This omission is the more noteworthy since a bull of canonization is one of the most important papal documents, but that is the very reason for omitting it or leaving it out. This sort of thing must be kept from Dürr's circle of readers. And down the bottom there, maybe that's a different one. Okay, now down there it says Dürr 380. Falsifications of the text are a very common Jesuit means of embellishment. The English Jesuit Foley was commissioned by the order to publish 8 large volumes of records, which furnish a collection of documents concerning the Jesuits in England. The Catholic historian Taunton says of this work in the preface to his history of the Jesuits in England, page 8, Foley's value consists almost as much in his own omissions as in his admissions, and he, bound to remark that he had found him at a critical point quietly leaving out, without any signs of omission, an essential part of a document which was adverse to his case. And Taunton supplies the proof for his weighty accusation on page 313, where he gives in full the account of the conversation between the Jesuit Old Corner, imprisoned in a tower on a charge of high treason, and Garnet restoring Garnet's admission of a vow of treason, quietly omitted by Foley, is left out, right? Removed, who, though professing to quote Gerard, gives no signs of omission. So it's a cover-up. Okay, so concerning the distribution of food, etc., the word remains would have weakened the impression of benevolence. This anthology, incomplete as it is, illustrative of the love of truth evinced in the writings of Dürr, will be most suitably concluded by a quotation from Dürr himself. Falsification remains falsification, and is always reprehensible, even when it is intended to attain or sanctify the most sacred ends. If we find an author untrustworthy in one particular, we are bound in the first instance to regard as correspondingly untrustworthy all his statements that fall under this heading. The Jesuit Dürr is a type. As he is, so are they all. No dependence is to be placed on works or documents published by Jesuits. The Jesuit axiom, the end sanctifies the means, is the first principle of Jesuit authorship. The end, the defence of the order and its glorification, sanctifies every falsification. So that may be it. There's more. We can leave a link to this book if you really want to read into them to know the truth, the real truth about the Jesuit Order. It sounds very, very dodgy. Okay. According to this person's writings in the late 1800s. We'll leave that up to you. We'll leave the link at the bottom of this video so you can go check out that book in your own time, at your own pace, if you really want to know the truth about them. You know, there's conspiracy theories and all this sort of crap, and not necessarily true, but this is written by a person who was 14 years in the Jesuit Order, so he knew what he's talking about. There's always a possibility that he's full of it, but maybe not. Maybe he wanted the truth out there because he could see a whole lot of baloney. He wanted people to know what it was really all about, the pros and the cons. Specifically the cons. They're hoodwinking people. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to us, give us a like, and add your comments below. What do you think of this order? Okay, yeah. If you're going to make a statement, bring the evidence, and just go blah 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 blah, a whole lot of rubbish in it with no source. Yeah, we'll be really interested in that. Here. For more than a century, this is Dominican Conchina, whom even the Jesuit Cocarda calls a righteous man, says, for more than a century and a half, Christian morality has had to endure the onset of bad doctrines. This method permeates the whole of casuistic theology and inflicts fatal wounds on almost every part of its body. Not content with perverting written law, it has almost wiped out all trace of that inscribed by nature in the heart of man. There is nothing too lax, unjust or shameful, not to say godless, for them to represent through the medium of unlimited probabilism as pious, decent and holy. That is the worst of all evils, the pestilential source which brings ruin to souls. They have found a middle road, not quite a broad way, so as not to call forth any involuntary alarm. It's under the radar, right? Nor yet straight and narrow, thus pandering to the evil inclinations of men, reconciling the world and the gospel and transforming rough roads into smooth ones. This middle road has probably carried more souls to hell than the broad way. And then Johann Adam Muller, professor at the University of Tübingen at that time, the greatest Catholic theologian of the 19th century, author of the rightly renowned Symbolic book, writes, and then it goes on from there. Okay, so if you really like this book, it's opening your eyes to Roman Catholic doctrine falsification, the Jesuit Order falsification, etc., then subscribe to us, give us a like, add your comments below, and then go share this video to your family, friends and others who are possibly under this church, possibly a member of this Jesuit Order, etc., etc. It would be great to hear their views. Yeah, keep it mature, etc., etc. Because we don't know nothing about Jesuits really. We just came across this. We had ideas, hearing this, hearing that, seeing this conspiracy theory claim and all this sort of stuff, and we were quite interested in it. We wanted to know, what were they really about? Because there's so much anti-against groups out there that you start to believe the first thing you read or you hear, and then you find from a person who's actually in that order, that movement for 14 to 20 years, the real truth, supposedly, right? But then you always get someone else that says, no, this is the truth. And another one says, no, this is the truth. I was in there, right, for 20 years. And then another one says, no, I was in there for 20 years and it's all rubbish. Okay, thank you for taking the time to watch this, our latest video. We will see you on the next one.